Have you ever felt like life suddenly went quiet, like the universe hit the mute button on everything around you? No drama, no chaos, but also no progress. Friends stop calling, opportunities dry up. Even your emotions feel flat. It's like you're walking through a fog where nothing quite connects anymore. This silence, it's not random. It's a sign, a sacred pause. In ancient spiritual teachings, there's a belief that when karma is being repaid, not just by others but by you, the universe doesn't scream. It whispers. It rearranges your life in subtle, quiet ways to help you realign, to help you grow. And here's the tricky part: we often miss it because we're too focused on noise. We think karma is about dramatic consequences like betrayals or public falls, but most karmic lessons come dressed in silence, in delayed texts, closed doors, and lonely evenings that make you ask, what did I do wrong? But maybe that question needs to shift. Maybe it's not about what you did wrong, but what you haven't made right with yourself. Let me ask you this: have you been silencing your own voice to please others? Have you stayed in a situation out of guilt, fear, or habit? That tension you've been feeling, that emotional fatigue, it could be your soul paying off an old karmic debt, not to punish you, but to free you. Here's one silent sign when people start leaving your life without warning. Not because of conflict, but because your energy no longer matches theirs. It's painful, yes, but it's also spiritual house cleaning. Another sign: you stop tolerating things you once accepted. You don't have the energy to fake a smile. That's not weakness, that's awakening. When karma is clearing, you're being emptied not as punishment, but as preparation. Your old self is making space for someone wiser, quieter, more powerful to emerge. So if you're in the silence right now, don't rush out of it. Sit with it, listen. Karma may be whispering your rebirth. Have you ever walked away from a simple conversation feeling like you just ran a marathon? You didn't move much, you didn't argue, you didn't even speak that much. But somehow your body is heavy, your mind is foggy, and your spirit hollow. You showed up smiling and left as a ghost of yourself. This isn't normal. And no, it's not just a rough chat or you being too sensitive. It's something deeper. Something far more dangerous than it appears on the surface. You just encountered an emotional parasite. Now I know that sounds dramatic, but emotional parasites don't scream. They don't manipulate with threats. They don't demand or shout. They drain you quietly with charm, vulnerability, and the illusion of intimacy. They feed not on your time, but on your energy. They show up looking like someone who needs help. They tell you life's been hard, or you're the only one who understands me. And because you're a kind, loyal, maybe even stoic soul, you listen, you nod, you give, again and again. But what starts as a conversation soon becomes a monologue, and what you thought was support becomes a siphon. Let me break it down. Every time you open your mouth to share something about your life, your struggles, your joys, your stories, they redirect the spotlight. You say, I've been feeling really off this week. They respond, wow, that reminds me of when I had that terrible week last year. Suddenly, it's about them. Again, it's subtle, it's polite, but it's parasitic. They don't want connection. They want extraction. And here's the hardest part: if you ever try to step back, if you express the need for rest or simply ask for space, they flip the script on you. But I thought you cared about me. Oh, so now I'm a burden. Wow. Guess I can't count on anyone. And just like that, you're apologizing for needing to breathe. You see, emotional parasites don't take by force. They make you feel guilty for not giving. They wrap their hunger in helplessness and their manipulation in emotion. But here's the truth: the world doesn't say enough. Being a good person does not mean being endlessly available. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You should not give your soul away so easily." Stoic wisdom reminds us that kindness isn't weakness. Compassion doesn't mean self-sacrifice. And emotional availability is not an open buffet for people to feast on whenever they're hungry for attention. You weren't born to be someone's endless supply of comfort. You're not a therapist on call. You're not an emotional ATM. You are allowed without apology to protect your peace. So how do you spot these emotional parasites before they drain you dry? Try this simple test before a conversation with someone you suspect might be draining. You pause, check in with yourself. What's your emotional state? Are you calm, energized, neutral? Now, after the interaction, ask again, do you feel lighter or heavier, clear or foggy, uplifted or hollowed out? If the answer is consistently negative, if you find yourself repeatedly walking away, drained, confused, guilty, or like you've just given away something vital, you're not just being a good friend, you're being harvested. And listen closely, this doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. It means someone has figured out how to take from you without asking. And worse, made you feel bad for noticing. But now you see it. And what you see, you can stop. Remember this, your energy is as sacred as your time. Guard it like a Stoic guards his mind with strength, clarity, and self-respect. You do not owe everyone your presence. You are not selfish for setting limits. You are not unkind for stepping away from people who make your soul shrink. The truth is, healthy relationships pour back into you. They may not always be easy, but they leave you nourished, not depleted. Emotional parasites, they just take, quietly, repeatedly, without guilt. So from now on, don't ignore that inner signal that says, I'm being emptied. Listen to it, honor it, and walk away if you must, because you are not here to be consumed. You are here to live, to thrive, and to protect the fire inside you, the very essence that emotional parasites mistake as fuel for themselves. Have you ever looked up one day and realized you don't talk to your friends as much as you used to? You've skipped a few family dinners. You haven't reached out to your cousin in months. You tell yourself you're just busy, just tired, just not in the mood. But the truth, you've started shrinking your world, and you didn't even notice. This is how subtle isolation begins. And it's not always your idea. You see, emotional manipulators don't always cut you off from people with force. They do it with suggestion, with just enough concern wrapped in love to sound convincing. They say things like, no one understands you like I do, or your friends only show up when they need something, or your mom doesn't really respect your choices, you know. And slowly the people who once grounded you begin to fade, not because they changed, but because your perspective did. You cancel a coffee date telling yourself it's just once, then again, until connection becomes a memory. And every time you withdraw, that one person, the one planting the seeds, makes you feel like you did the right thing. You're better off without them. It's just you and me now. At first, it feels comforting, but later, it starts to feel confining. What was once love starts to resemble control. This isn't protection, this is possession. And it's one of the oldest manipulation tactics in the book, Emotional Monopolization. When someone tries to make themselves the only voice in your life, they're not trying to build a connection, they're trying to own it. And here's the scary part. It doesn't look evil, it looks like care, it sounds like concern. But real love doesn't isolate. Real connection doesn't require silence from others to thrive. Let me ask you, have you ever hesitated to call a friend because you knew it would upset someone else? Have you started second-guessing whether you even need other people? That's not your intuition talking. That's conditioning. You've been taught slowly to believe that one person is enough, that you don't need anyone else, that more voices just bring confusion. But that's a lie dressed up as loyalty, and Stoic wisdom cuts through it like a blade. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor himself, wrote that we must not tie our happiness to things outside of our control. But he also reminded us that we do have control over our associations. The people we choose to surround ourselves with, those are within our power. So if someone is actively pulling you away from people who once made you stronger, you have to ask yourself, why are they so afraid of you being surrounded by love that isn't theirs? Because true love doesn't compete. It doesn't need to isolate you to feel secure. It doesn't thrive in the dark corners of silence. It expands you, not compresses you. And here's the truth that might hurt a little. You're not too tired to see your friends. You've just been taught that they no longer matter. But they do. And you do. You matter outside of this one relationship. You exist beyond the confines of someone else's comfort zone. And the moment you see the invisible wall being built around your life is the moment you can tear it down. So if you're feeling smaller lately, less joyful, less connected, less, you pause and ask, who in my life is applauding this shrinking? And more importantly, who do I need to reconnect with to start expanding again? Because real love doesn't say, it's just you and me. It says, you should have the whole world, and I'll stand beside you while you reach for it. Have you ever had someone look you straight in the eyes and say, that never happened? Or, you're being too sensitive? Or maybe, you're imagining things again? And in that moment, something inside you paused. Not because they were right, but because they were so sure, and you weren't. You remember what was said. You remember how it made you feel, but suddenly you're questioning it all. Your memory, your emotions, your sanity, that pause, that internal confusion. That's not just disagreement, that's gaslighting. Gaslighting isn't yelling, it isn't dramatic. It's quiet psychological warfare designed to chip away at your sense of truth, until the only voice you trust is theirs. It begins slowly, so slowly that you might not even notice. A conversation you know happened suddenly, didn't. A promise they clearly made somehow vanished. You bring up how something made you feel, and they say, wow, you're really overreacting today. And just like that, you start to shrink. Not physically, but mentally, emotionally. You hesitate before speaking up. You rehearse your words in your head. You wonder, am I making too big a deal out of this? This is the trap. Gaslighting works because it makes you doubt not just what you experienced, but whether you even had the right to feel it at all. It's not just about controlling the conversation, it's about controlling your perception. Let me give you an example. You say, it hurt me when you ignored my texts for 2 days. They reply, you're always so dramatic, I was just busy. And it's not like you said anything important anyway. Now, instead of standing in your truth, you're questioning whether your hurt was even valid. And next time, you'll probably stay silent. But that silence, it doesn't come from peace. It comes from surrender. Gaslighting trains you to suppress your reality in favor of theirs. And over time, you stop trusting your instincts altogether. But here's the Stoic truth. You are the only reliable narrator of your inner world. Epictetus once said, we are not disturbed by things, but by the view we take of them. But when someone twists that view again and again, they're not just disturbing your peace, they're hijacking your internal compass. So what can you do when you feel yourself slipping into this fog? You anchor yourself in your own truth. Start small. Start privately. Keep a journal, not for poetry, not for performance, but for proof. Write down what was said, what you felt, what happened. Use your own words as evidence. Because when the world starts rewriting your story, you need something that reminds you of your reality. And remember, you're not overreacting for having emotions. You're not imagining things because you remember pain. And you're not too sensitive just because someone refuses to take responsibility for the hurt they caused. Gaslighting doesn't want to win the argument. It wants to convince you you're not even allowed to have one. But here's the powerful truth. You don't need permission to feel. You don't need someone else to validate your memory before it's real. Your emotions are real. Your experience is real, and your instincts are wiser than you've been taught to believe. If someone constantly twists your words, denies your reality, and makes you feel like your truth is too much, that's not love. That's not connection. That's erasure. So today, I want you to reclaim one thing: your voice. Speak it, write it, hold it with both hands, because your story deserves to be told exactly as it happened, exactly as you felt it, not filtered through someone else's comfort. And the moment you stop apologizing for being real is the moment the gaslight goes out. Have you ever known someone who seemed like a saint in public, but felt like a stranger or even a threat behind closed doors? Out there, they're charming, witty, helpful, generous. Everyone loves them. People admire them. You've probably even heard, "You're so lucky to have them." But when the doors shut and no one else is watching, they change. The warmth disappears. The humor goes cold. The love conditional served in fragments like crumbs. And you start to wonder, is it me? Am I imagining this? You're not. You're experiencing something called intermittent reinforcement, one of the most powerful and dangerous psychological traps in human relationships. Here's how it works. One day they pour love on you, affection, compliments, attention. You feel seen, held, chosen. Then without warning, they withdraw it all. They go silent, cold, distant, critical. And just when you're about to give up, when you're seconds from walking away, they flip again. They smile. They touch your hand. They say the words you've been starving to hear. And you stay. Not because you trust them, but because you're chasing the version of them that loved you first. The version that made you feel alive. The version that maybe never really existed. You see, intermittent reinforcement is the same technique used in gambling addiction. You never know when the reward will come, so you keep playing, you keep hoping, you keep pulling the lever. But this isn't a slot machine. This is your life, and your nervous system is being trained to accept inconsistency as love. Let me ask you something personal. Do you ever find yourself replaying conversations, trying to figure out what you did wrong? Do you feel like you're constantly trying to get back to the good days, the early days before everything got confusing? That confusion isn't weakness. It's a symptom of emotional whiplash, and it's not your fault. These emotional highs and lows are not signs of passion. They're signs of control. You're being trained to bond with someone who only loves you enough to keep you hooked, but never enough to set you free. It's a loop. And it's meant to make you addicted to the potential of a person who only appears when it benefits them. Stoic philosopher Seneca once wrote, "A wise man is always the same." In other words, real character doesn't change depending on the audience. If someone is kind in public but cruel in private, trust the version they hide. Because true love doesn't require an audience. It doesn't need a spotlight. And it doesn't vanish the moment you're alone. So here's what I want you to remember. If you feel more alone with someone than you do without them, if you're walking on eggshells, editing yourself, shrinking so you don't set them off, if you're constantly chasing their approval, their warmth, their old self, you're not in a relationship. You're in a psychological prison. And no matter how beautiful the beginning was, if the present is full of fear, confusion, or silence, then the mask has already fallen. You just haven't named it yet. But now you can, because once you see the pattern, you can break it. True connection is consistent. It's honest. It's safe. It doesn't keep you guessing. It doesn't punish you with silence. And it never asks you to become less just to be loved more. So if someone only treats you well when others are watching, that's not love. That's a performance. And you were never meant to be their audience. You were meant to be whole. Have you ever shared a dream with someone, something that lights you up inside, and they smile gently and say, "That's nice, but maybe try something more realistic"? At first it doesn't sound cruel. They don't laugh in your face. They don't shut you down with harsh words. They use a softer weapon: concern. I just want what's best for you. I'm only saying this because I care. Maybe you should aim for something safer. And slowly, piece by piece, that fire in you dims. Not because it wasn't real, not because you didn't believe in it, but because someone else made you second-guess what you felt so deeply. This is subtle sabotage. They don't say, give up your dream. They just call it naive. They don't mock your passions. They just suggest you tone them down. And over time, what once made you feel alive starts to feel like a mistake. And here's the most heartbreaking part. You start editing yourself. You stop sharing your excitement. You shrink your goals into something small enough to be acceptable. And eventually, you stop trying altogether because their voice became louder than your own. But let me ask you something honest. Do you remember who you were before you needed someone else's permission to believe in yourself? The version of you that was loud, curious, maybe even a little messy, but fully alive. The you that danced without rhythm. The you that said what you thought without shrinking. The you that dreamed boldly. That version of you isn't gone. They were just shamed into silence. All it took was one dismissive smirk, one harmless joke about your ambition, one too many honest opinions. And here's what most people never say out loud. Sometimes the people who love you also fear you changing, because your growth might mean outgrowing them. So they offer advice to keep you small, not because they're evil, but because your light threatens their comfort. That's why Stoic wisdom is so powerful here. Epictetus once said, "Do not trade your nature for their approval." In other words, your identity is not a group project. You don't need a vote to be who you are. You don't need everyone to understand your dreams before you chase them. And you don't owe anyone a more comfortable version of yourself. Because the truth is, real love doesn't require you to shrink. It doesn't ask you to trade authenticity for approval. It doesn't whisper you're too much when all you're doing is showing up fully. So if someone in your life constantly makes your dreams feel like delusions, if their help feels more like pressure to settle, if their encouragement always comes with a ceiling, it's time to ask, are they protecting me or protecting their idea of me? Because here's what you need to know. Every time you silence your voice to keep someone else comfortable, you're stepping further away from your truest self. And the longer you do that, the harder it becomes to hear your own thoughts over theirs. But the beautiful thing is that fire inside you, it's still there. It's never gone, only hidden. And now you get to reclaim it, not by asking for permission, not by waiting for applause, but by daring to believe in your voice again. So go back to the dream they called unrealistic. Go back to the part of you they told to tone down. Go back to the moment you believed before the world convinced you to settle, because no one who truly loves you will ever ask you to be less numb, just to make them feel more in control. So, what if I told you the real soul thieves don't have horns or haunted eyes? They don't lurk in shadows or show up in nightmares. They sit across from you at dinner. They tell you they love you, and slowly, so quietly, you begin to disappear. Piece by piece, your voice, your spark, your dreams, until one day you catch a glimpse of yourself in the mirror and barely recognize the person staring back. That's the brutal truth of emotional manipulation. It's not loud, it's strategic. It doesn't always come from enemies. Sometimes it comes wrapped in intimacy and affection from people who never wanted to love you. They wanted to own you. And here's the hardest part to accept. You can't go back to the person you thought they were, because that person never really existed. It was a performance, a carefully crafted version designed to gain your trust, so they could rewrite your story. But here's the Stoic truth that saved me. As Marcus Aurelius once said, the obstacle in the path becomes the path. In other words, the very people who tried to break you also pointed you back to yourself. You woke up because of them. You grew stronger in spite of them. And now you get to do something powerful. You reclaim what was taken. You reclaim your voice, even if it trembles at first. You reclaim your dreams, especially the ones they called foolish. You reclaim your identity, the one they tried to replace with something smaller, safer, easier to control. And most of all, you reclaim your energy. You learn to set boundaries, not as walls, but as sacred lines that protect your peace. You stop explaining yourself to people who only want to edit you. You stop shrinking to fit inside someone else's story. And if today's video spoke to you, if something inside you stirred, then maybe this isn't just the end of a video. Maybe it's the beginning of your return to self. But don't stop here, because there's someone out there, still trapped, still confused, still believing the mask is real. So share this, not just to spread truth, but to give someone else the chance to wake up sooner than you did. This is how we heal, not just alone, but together. One voice, one truth, one soul reclaimed at a time. You were never broken. You were just waiting to remember who you've always been.